All right. Hello and welcome everybody to your Together Digital Power Lounge. This is your place to hear authentic conversations with those who have power to share. My name is Amy Vaughan, and I am the owner and Chief Empowerment Officer of Together Digital, a diverse and collaborative community of women who work in digital and choose to share their knowledge, power, and connections. You can join the movement at www.togetherindigital.com. So, today, content marketers, we're talking about ChatGPT. Have you embraced it yet? Does it make you a little nervous or feel fearful for your content making future? Or have you dove straight in and learned the ins and outs of it and finding ways to make your life easier? But what are the pitfalls? What are the things we need to be watching out for? As everything, in technology continues to progress, we want to really cover what to avoid and where things like this could be truly helpful. So we are here today with Lindsey McGee. She's an experienced content marketing leader with experience in SEO, writing, strategy for B2B technology brands. Her work includes positions at startups and multinational enterprises, corporations. She has also worked for herself as a freelance writer and SEO consultant. Currently, Lindsey is the content marketing manager for Obie, an insurance technology provider that offers affordable and transparent insurance experience for landlords and real estate investors. Lindsey has spent plenty of time with her two cats and a dog at her home office, and in her free time, she can often be found baking or curled up with a good book. That sounds great right about now, Lindsey, as we get into the long weekend. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It is so wonderful to be here. I'm really, really excited about this. It's such an important topic for everyone to understand, especially for content marketers, but really for anyone in the digital space who wants to know what's happening on the internet right now. It's a big topic.
It is a very big topic. In fact, some of us just went to, here in Cincinnati, an in-person event just talking about AI. And again, I'm just floored at, you think you're on top of things and then you hear other people speak and the ways in that they're using it. It was just kind of mind-boggling. It was definitely in ways that I hadn't considered. So I feel super primed and ready. Oh, I wanted to share one quote that I did hear from yesterday that I thought was really interesting, and you might all find a little comforting, content marketers, is that AI will not steal your job. People who use AI will. Or people who know how to use AI will. So I'm glad that you all are here and you are chatbot curious or ChatGPT curious. Lindsey, why don't you share with our listeners a little bit more about your experience in content marketing and how you've seen things evolve over the years before we kind of dive into the whole AI ChatGPT topic?
Oh my gosh, yes. So I've been in the content marketing space since 2015, 2016, and it's amazing how much it's changed in the past, eight-ish years, 8-9 years. It really used to be that content marketing was this sort of nice to have add-on. We knew that there was a great ROI for it, but typically it took a backseat to PPC and all these other strategies that were more of a focus at the time. And then you had, of course, SEO, and SEO was really viewed as a very separate thing from content. You had the blogs you were writing, and then you had SEO, and the keywords and the optimization that was happening was very strategic in that way. Then we came into the phase of content is king. Content is everywhere. It's everything that you need to be doing. And it's all about production. How many blogs can you possibly get out there? How fast can you get them out there? And then what do you need to do to make them perfect and rank perfectly? And now we're seeing a shift more towards intentional content creation. I know we originally met at Content Marketing Institute's Content Marketing World last year. They were talking about this a lot. It's not about just production. It's about focusing on the user intent and understanding where they're coming to you and why they're coming to you, and then having your content operate across different channels. So really repurposing things, updating things, distributing it, and thinking about where and how you're distributing your pieces of content. And of course, there's a production aspect to all of that, but it's not so much focused on output as it is focused on impact. And that's been really wonderful to see. And we're seeing this really wonderful combination of content and SEO. So I see a lot of content marketers who are really getting into the SEO side of things and understanding the analytics of it and the science and the art of it coming together. And we're seeing Google really be appreciative of those things. The helpful content update was huge for content marketers to understand, hey, how we're writing things and how we're talking to people is just as important as the keywords and the speed and all of these other things. And there, heads up to everyone, there's another update to the helpful content update coming sometime this summer. So it really is important that we think about content in a really intentional way.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I started off as an SEO copywriter when I first got into the agency, and I think it really helped me understand the importance of strategy and content and brevity, because it's all strategy. It's all figuring out, how to get people to the content, not just creating it, but bringing them there. And I love that. And now that you mention it, I really don't know. Were we talking anything much AI at Content Marketing World last year? I mean, this was September of last year.
No.
Not long ago.
Yeah. No, the AI conversation began, it launched in November. And then in January, it exploded, at least to my knowledge. Maybe there were people who were on it in November, but I wasn't really in it until January.
I mean, it was being developed. It was in beta, but yes, I mean, it's just one of those things where it was like kind of just on the periphery, this idea of AI. And, even at Together Digital conferences in the past, we've had talks about bots from a customer service and social media standpoint. But yeah, I mean, just how fast. I mean, we know that this industry changes fast, but I mean, for the almost 15, 20 years I've been in it, I don't know. I mean, I don't know that I've seen something kind of come in so fast and so furious. And it's pretty exciting, at least in my opinion. I realize it's probably scary for some too, but kind of just thinking through that, what are some of the key challenges that you have faced in adopting new technologies like, ChatGPT, or I'm trying to think of anything like does personalization, optimization, like there's been so many things over the years that have just come out of nowhere and like make us reevaluate our entire workflow and approach.
So honestly, the biggest challenge I have is that these kinds of tech innovations, especially in the AI world, they're very shiny. And when I say they're very shiny, I mean, they grab attention in the news, they grab attention on social media. So your execs are seeing this before you've had a chance to get to know about it, to test it. With most marketing technologies, if you think about something like HubSpot or SEMrush or these other pieces, usually there's a whole process before buying them where you're tinkering with it and testing it, and you're proving this could be useful in this way and learning about it. This is totally the opposite. This is execs are coming to you saying, there's this thing and you should be using it right now. And they don't have all the information. They have the buzziness of it, essentially. So they really want to jump on this trend, and they may not have had some of those deeper conversations. The other issue with these viral technologies is that they often come with a huge amount of misinformation. So everyone wants to jump on the trend, which means so do all the publishers and the creatives out there. So everyone's creating guides and tactics, and here are a million use cases you could have for this. And the reality is some of those use cases make no sense when you actually do the research into it. But it's so hard to start digging it through and saying what is real and what is fake and what is marketing. As a marketing person, what is just marketing? Right. So for me, the viral technologies, I want to look at it from the perspective of I need to get into it immediately. So the moment that I heard that people in my business were talking about it, I took an entire day of my work and I said, I'm not doing anything else today. I am learning about ChatGPT today. And I read as many things as I could, not only about the idea of ChatGPT, but also about AI writing tools in general and the models that they're built off of and how those models actually work. Because when you get down to the programming side, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more, when you get down to the programming side of large language models, there's less marketing around a boring, topic about coding and stuff, but it's more realistic in terms of understanding the limitations and things of that nature. So I'm also blessed because I have programmers in my family. So I was able to go to them and say, what do you know about this? And what should I think about? The other thing is, it's just very scary. This is probably the first time that I've seen something that made me feel very threatened as a writer. We saw this a lot with artists with the AI generated art that we've had, right? Artists saying, well, why are they going to come to me and pay all this money when they can basically ask a robot to emulate my style and sort of steal my style a bit? So there was a little bit of that. It's going to take my writing. It's going to repeat what I've said. And also it's going to replace me. And we saw companies that were happening to have layoffs right around the same time that they were also implementing ChatGPT. So it was really difficult from that perspective. And then as a researcher, it's also very difficult because now I don't know when I'm reading and when I'm researching topics for content that I'm making, was that created by an AI? Was it validated? Is it accurate? And that all becomes a lot more difficult. So It was definitely really difficult. The ways that I have gotten around it are just being as informed as possible, staying up to date on it, seeing what other marketers are saying, and taking every single thing with a grain of salt, and
Yep.
always coming back to this is how the model works. And also reading a lot of stuff that OpenAI has put out, because they've put out a
Yes.
lot of their data is going to be the most relevant we have. We hope that they're being as transparent as possible. So far, they have been. So they put out a lot that talks about the limitations and the ethics and these things about their own product. So it really comes down to education.
I think that's so true. And you bring out a good point as a marketer, content marketer, whatever, like you are playing this dual role. It's a double-edged sword of being somebody who's learning something literally right then and there, but then also having to educate at the same time, like while you're learning, and that's hard.
Yeah.
And so I really like your tempered, more measured approach to all of it, because, you know, taking time and carving time out to say, I need a day. I need a day to like take and learn this and know this and understand this, because to your point, you don't want to be fearful. You don't want to hold back from it, because clearly people are going to be pushing for it because there is so much conversation around it. And we love our big shiny objects in this industry, even though we create them, we fall for them too. But the fact that like there's not a lot of legalities and or regulation around that kind of content, what's being generated, what's being created yet, because again, like, I mean, technology moves fast and the rest of our systems like government move really slow. So for us to be able to kind of trust what's always being put out there, I think it's a fair call, and it's a good, important point to make. How do you perceive ChatGPT's impact on the future of content creation now that we're kind of like in it and you've had a little couple of months to start, to be able to see what's good, what's bad? Do you have any genuine concerns for content creators?
I am honestly a little less concerned than I have been when we've chatted previously, and less concerned than I was at the beginning. At the beginning, I was pretty doom and gloom, honestly. I love writing, and it's the core of what I do. And I just felt like, I was seeing large companies that were choosing to do that instead of have writers. And that was terrifying to me. And B2B tech, over this past 6 months has been having huge layoffs anyways. So it was a very scary time, because you have essentially this bot that's being told to everyone can sound just like you. And so can it replace you? The more I read about it, the more I started to understand its limits, and that really helped. But there has already been a huge impact. One of the studies I was reading, it was from Resume Builder, and they did something back in February. They did a survey, and 48% of their respondents said that they've replaced workers with AI writers. And that, I remember at the very beginning, people telling me it's not that big of a deal. It's not going to really have an impact on people. I just started Obie 30 days ago. When I was looking at opportunities, there were jobs that said experience in AI prompting is required. So it really is out there. It really is a thing. You're not going to be able to ignore it, unfortunately. And there are companies that are going to choose to have fewer writers and to choose to have their writers act more like editors, which is not what I want to be doing all the time, is just editing what a robot has to say. So I really hope that I will be at companies where I'm able to find that balance. And I do think the other flip side is some companies are starting to find a balance. They realize that an AI is not going to have the same impact as a writer who can think and brainstorm and come up with innovative ideas. You will need people to edit, even if you were using AI all the time, but there are situations in which it's just not the right method. So there are a lot of companies that are starting to realize that. And there are companies that have gone the ChatGPT route who are now, hiring people back because they're realizing, oh, you can't just hand something off. So, but I also think, so there is a real concern. I also think in terms of the future of content creation, it will help with some of those really repetitive processes. So, some of the getting the ball rolling, when you run into writer's block because you're, writing PPC ads and you need to write the same unique proposition 50 different ways so that you can A/B test it. You might run into some writer's block, and it's okay to have something help you with that. Or it's really fantastic at translation. So there are a lot of different ways that you can use it that can take some of the work out for you so that you can focus on that creativity and things. But what we as marketers need to do on our teams with our execs is create systems that allow us to cut out some of that repetitive stuff without infringing on the creative process.
Yeah. I mean, I think back to when I was doing SEO initially and I was working on Ford. I literally spent 40 hours a week copy and pasting. Like I had 147 characters. I had each make and model of each car in each city that we
Mhm.
had, dealerships in. And I'd have to sit there and figure out how to copy and paste each, like I would write my baseline of copy and then have to write out each other. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like I'm going to
Yeah.
lose my ever loving mind. I mean, I'm talking like thousands upon thousands of
Mhm.
cells. And so I started talking to my husband, who's a programmer and understood Excel much better than me as well, and started to
Yeah.
show me how we could basically write a little bit of code that would let me kind of take my base copy and then replace my make, my model, my city with
Yep.
my list of those things. And all of a sudden, I had all this free time. I was able to work on a TV spot that ended up airing on ESPN with Ken Block, RIP Ken. But like, it was just one of those things, I think, like you're saying, there's systems and ways and opportunities in which we can take low lying, repetitive, grunt type work out of the
Mhm.
way and give people opportunity to do more creative and experiential type things, spend more time being human than being the machines ourselves. And then I would
Yes.
also say, I think you were smart in saying, being cautious about prompting and understanding and knowing how to prompt is very key because
Mhm.
as we know, junk in, junk out sort of mentality is that, just because it's there doesn't mean you're going to get good quality stuff out of it. You
Yep.
have to know how to tell it what you want, what you need. You have to think about outcome. So there's still strategy and creative, even in leveraging the machine itself.
Mhm.
Um, and like I was saying before, the event that we were at earlier this week, I was just really floored by how some folks were kind of embracing the technology and using it to sort of, like you said, truncate and kind of get rid of that repetitive work that was
Mhm.
really slowing them down and then free them up for bigger, more kind of higher thinking, more creative type of work as well. I was really quite floored in some of the ways they were using it. I was like, I never would have even thought. And I will say too, as a small business owner, I find this also hugely empowering because when you've got a
Mhm.
team of 3 people running an entire organization and you don't have the means to hire more, if you have the ability and knowledge to leverage something like ChatGPT for your business in a way that's effective and efficient and you're fact checking all these things that we're talking about as well, golly, how much power do you
Oh
have?
yeah.
Like, how much more democratized is content now and the ability to create it when you've got something like this, under your belt? So there's 2 sides, obviously. So other than
Of
what you
course.
mentioned, was there anything else kind of on the flip side that you felt that were valuable tools for content marketers? And what specific areas that something like ChatGPT can help them excel?
In terms of the ways that ChatGPT is being used,
Yeah.
because so it's being used in a lot of different ways. I mean, Salesforce is adding it as an assistant to Slack.
Yep.
I know, I believe Duolingo is now bringing it in as a way to help people learn languages, which is really cool. Quizlet
Very
is
cool.
using it to tutor people. And with every single one of these things, I think to myself, okay, that's great. What about the limits? Is it going to be accurate? How are these people folding in these pieces of technology? And, are we changing how we look at information and the backup of that information? Even Google just announced at Google I/O that they're going to have a AI generative response option that's
Mhm.
coming out. And that is going to it's going to cite its sources, which is really great for all us SEOs who are worried about those 0 clicks.
Yes.
But it changes the game when you can have, your smart devices. I won't say the name because mine will respond.
Right.
But when you can have your smart devices just tell you an answer, how much further are you going to look into it? So,
Mm.
so there's a tons of ways that it's being used, and I view every one of them with excitement and caution.
Right. Yes. I love the balance that you bring to it. Could
Yeah.
you provide some examples or use cases where ChatGPT is successfully integrated into some of the marketing campaigns that either you've seen or that you've worked on?
Yeah. So, in terms of what's actually going on in the marketplace, the thing that's interesting is that a lot of big name companies, they're using the tools and they're creating these apps and experiences, right? We're seeing a lot of tech companies that are integrating it into their applications. In the content space, though, we're really still in that experimentation phase. So plenty of people are using it, but you're
Mhm.
not seeing, oh, we started using it for email marketing and we saw this percent, growth in what we were doing. You're not
Right.
seeing that as much. And I think that's for 2 reasons. Number one, everyone's very excited about ChatGPT, but people don't really like admitting that they're using it. on
Yeah.
a large scale, because there is a justifiable stigma against it. If I know that the companies that I enjoy
Yeah.
are sending me AI generated emails, that
Mhm.
makes me feel less special and less personal, like
Yeah.
it's less of a personal relationship, which we already knew that those emails weren't really coming from, Polly at whatever.
Right.
But it downgrades that a little bit. So
Mhm.
companies that are in the B2C space, they're not really going to be talking about it as much. I think where we're going to start to see those case studies is going to be the content marketing agencies, the SEO agencies.
Yeah.
They're going to talk about, we've implemented this, and by using it, we've helped our clients do X, Y, Z. But even that, it hasn't come out yet. And I think it's just because we're still in that experimentation aspect. So we see people who are talking about how you could use it. There's tons of use case pieces. There are tons of consultants talking about what they're playing with and everything, but we haven't started to see the results just yet. One area I did see some information about was in product descriptions, for Amazon, like you said,
Yeah.
if you have 10 different things and they're all very similar, but you need to write about them a little bit differently. I have heard that that's been really helpful in terms of time savings.
Yeah.
So that's one area where I think we will start seeing some more tangible information. But right now it's a lot of trying things and seeing how it goes.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I hear a lot of people doing it for like subject line, A/B testing, things like that as well. Content, kind of like brainstorming, like almost using it like a virtual assistant. Like it's an extra brain. It's an intern. Somebody actually said that too. I said that they were using the ChatGPT as like an intern, where it's like you definitely check the intern's work, and you're going to be looking over their shoulder because you're like, you don't know everything yet, but you're going to be a great help to me because you're basically getting that low like fruit, some groundwork started, so that then I can kind of come in and give it the gloss, the shine, and the proof that it needs. So I think those are some kind of interesting ways to sort of view it in particular. Are there, we kind of talked about this a little bit at the beginning with the first question. And I think it's an important one because obviously, like I said, we're kind of sitting in that interesting spot where as marketers, we are learning and we are teaching at the same time. And it's kind of like, and we're looking over our shoulders because we're like, okay, well, while I'm educating you, executive leadership, on this AI tool, I'm also worried about my job. So what are some ways that we can talk to leaders and stakeholders? What are some best practices and strategies to follow in those communications to make sure that we're really covering all of our bases and maybe in some cases our own ass?
Absolutely. It's really important when you go into those conversations. And one of the things that you just said, people are treating it like an intern, and keep reminding people that it's not a person. It's not a human. It doesn't have a mind. It doesn't think about things and come to conclusions and have ideas. And I hear people all the time say, no, interns are wonderful.
Right.
But I hear people all the time say, I wanted to see what ChatGPT thought. I wanted to see what conclusion it would come to, or, how it would put that together. I'm like, it's not putting that together. That's not how large language models work. And I'm happy to go into, how they actually work. I think that's really important for people to know. But first off, eliminating that way of talking about it. Talking about it the way that you talk about your text predictor on your phone, and talking about it as a really, really great text thing, reminding people that it's about language, it's not about ideation, and making sure that they understand that difference between it and you, because you know that you are more valuable because you can do something that it cannot. You can innovate. It cannot innovate. It cannot come up with an idea that hasn't been in its data set. It will not happen. So you bring something to the table that it never can. Make sure that your execs know that. Talk about that. Talk about the ideas that you're having, and then play this like you would play any other tool. Play it like you would play a HubSpot. Here's the idea that I've had, and here's how we're going to use that to get there. Do your due diligence. Be the person who brings the conversation to your team. Don't wait for an exec to come to you and say, oh, I need to know about this, or we need to start using this. Because by that point, they formulated a lot of their own opinions. So be the person who brings the conversation to them. Be the person who provides guidance, gets everyone on the same page. Know that you can't just ignore it. And if you do, you're going to hear about random people in your company who are using it, probably in ways that you don't want them to. So as content marketers, we are the owners of our brand. We're the owners of our messaging. We need to really feel confident in that consistency and not worry that people in other departments or in other customer facing roles are using this in a way that we wouldn't want them to. I'm also a really big fan of guides. I love brand style guides. I love writing style guides. I think they're incredibly useful. So thinking about ChatGPT that way is really great. There are tons of guides out there about how you can use it, but you wouldn't use another brand's brand style guide for yours. You wouldn't use their colors. You wouldn't use their logos. You wouldn't use their way of doing things. You might take inspiration from them, but you're going to have your own brand guidelines, and you should have your own ChatGPT guidelines about this is the scenario in which we feel comfortable using it in these ways. This is how we keep our ethics good. This is how we keep the system working, and this is how we get more efficiency. So for example, if you're in an area where email marketing is super huge for you and your brand is all about like super peppy, unique emails, don't use ChatGPT for that, because you're not going to get weird ideas and interesting things. You know, someone like, I don't want to name specific brands, but someone who's a little bit more very specific B2C startup might not be good for them to use it for that, or for social, or for things of those nature. Versus if you're more of a legacy brand and email marketing is not as much, or your brand voice is a little more standard, a little more traditional, then you might be able to use that for your basis of your emails and build from there. And it'll be reasonable. It won't need as much editing, and you can keep your voice, which is really good. So think about that the same way that you think about a brand guideline. And then train people, do a lunch and learn, make tutorial videos, talk about prompting. Prompting is a skill, and it's something we have to develop. Saying, hey, ChatGPT, write me a blog on topic, not going to give you the greatest results. But saying to it, here are the parameters that we need. Here's who we are. Here's who the reader is. Here's what I need. Here's the length, etc. There's tons of stuff you can put in there that will help to have you do less editing on the back end, though you should always edit on the back end. But it will help you quite a lot. And if you can standardize that so that your writers have a framework they can go back to, it's going to give you better consistency. So that training is super important.
Yeah. I think it's all great advice. I love that. You're positioning yourself as a subject matter expert. You're positioning it as a tool, not a person, which I think is smart, although I personify everything. But I think it's a good distinction to make in the space of work and what we're talking about. I think, and by being the person who steps in and helps to educate, create those guidelines, you're setting yourself in a position of authority on what it is, how it works, why it works, how it doesn't work, and where not to use it. To not only that, but you've got the opportunity to potentially save your company from some potential ethical ramifications, which we've already seen happen with some folks, some messaging when they don't proof, for example. Are there any other ethical considerations that content marketers should keep in mind when using ChatGPT, and how can they ensure that they're using it both responsibly and transparently?
Absolutely. ChatGPT, like everything else in marketing, you need to approach it carefully. So I think first and foremost, you need to acknowledge the fact that as an AI and anything in machine learning, it's learning off of the base of human writers. So if it's coming up with a cool turn of phrase, or it's thinking about that, it's been said before by someone like you, like me. Our writing was used to teach this thing, and we're not getting any credit for it. We're not getting any royalties for what it's putting out there. So, there's not really a good answer to that, because it's not going to be able to say, oh, I took inspiration from these 5 people. But being aware that it's not generating unique ideas, it's not generating completely unique text. It may be unique in terms of those words having not been said in all of that order before, but it's not unique conceptually. So just being aware of that and knowing that you aren't going to get something that is groundbreaking from it is really important. And knowing that it is learning from everything that people are doing is also really important. We also, again, need to be really careful about misinformation. AI writers are, and do you mind if I go into a little bit of how they actually work?
Please,
so
yes.
AI writers are built on something called a large language model. And what a large language model does is it takes in a massive amount of information on writing and patterns of writing. So it understands not only words and their meanings, but also their context, their relations to each other, how a sentence is built. And it takes all of that information and it's able to say, based on the input that you've given me, this is how I think the sentence should go. That will read well and will make you happy. Nowhere in there is validation. No, they're not saying, I'm going to go read a whole bunch of stuff and come to a conclusion and make sure that it's correct. It is thinking about what is the next word, what is the next phrase that needs to continue to fill out this answer. So when you are getting information from it, it's not sourcing. There's no sourcing on ChatGPT 3. I think they talked about it a bit with ChatGPT 4, which is in beta and paid. So there's your revenue starter for ChatGPT just about now. But you don't know where that data is coming from. And it does have some accuracy issues, significant accuracy issues, in fact. And it's been caught in that many, many times. So this is important for any business, but I would say absolutely, especially if you work in what SEOs call the your money, your life space. If you're a business that impacts people's health, their financial decisions, mental health, well-being, anything of that nature, be extremely diligent about using this, because healthcare decisions, like, these are not things that people should take lightly anyways. So you have to assume that it may not be quoting the actual best practice. It may be quoting what it had on that topic when it actually learned about that topic and putting it into words in a new way. So seriously, seriously important, especially depending on your industry. And then the other thing is, be aware of the bias. You know, we all carry biases with us when we are talking about different topics. You know, there are so many different, especially gender biases and prejudices that we carry around, that we say, like, well, this person must do this because they look like this, or because they sound like this, or and we don't think about that in writing. We don't think about that in machines. But when we build the machines and when we teach them based on human inputs, they get those biases too. So for instance, if you had this trained on writing, and every single piece of writing that it saw that talked about software developers referred to them as men, then the system is going to assume that all software developers are men, which is completely incorrect. But if all it sees is he, him, every time the word software development comes up, it's going to make that assumption. And that's you know, just one example. There are plenty of other ways that bias can impact how it's writing. It's also programmed to be polite. It's not supposed to be rude. And sometimes as content writers, we're writing about difficult topics. We're writing about frustrating things. We're writing about the negatives of something. And it's getting really difficult to do that with a system that doesn't want to make you upset. Yeah. So, and then the other thing is, be really careful with your data. Understand that anything you put into it is added to that database. And while I believe they have said they're not showing your conversation to anyone, nothing's going verbatim, your data is going into that learning system. So, you know, I saw a Forbes piece at one point that was saying, oh, doctors could use this to make it easier to put notes in for patients. I'm like, oh, that's a HIPAA violation. You definitely can't put patient information into this. No. So generally, the rule I have with that is, don't put it into ChatGPT if you wouldn't put it on LinkedIn. If you can put it on a LinkedIn post and have any customer and any competitor see it, don't put it in there. Don't put your first party data that accounting wants a summary of for an internal meeting. Don't do any of that and put it into ChatGPT, because you have no control over where it goes from there. And we're, as you said, with legal, we're already seeing there be some significant questions about that in terms of, especially in Europe with GDPR rules, there's some real questions about how this technology is going to be used if you assume that it could be everything's getting taken in.
Yeah, a lot more consumer protections on that end in that part of the country, that part of the world, I should say. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me that it's kind of coming up first and foremost there. Yeah. Those are all great examples and great things to watch out for. In your current role as content marketer for Obie, have you explored and started implementing any ChatGPT in your content creation process? If so, what's been your experience so far? Because I know even as you were job hunting, you were very deliberate about looking for and making sure that obviously they weren't relying too much on this too soon. Yes, I personally found that really important. I didn't want to go and work at a place where I knew that my expectation was to be a robot editor. So I did cut out some potential opportunities that I thought maybe were leaning a little too hard. I actually just hit my 30-day mark at Obie, which I'm very excited about. So mostly right now, I'm really focused on content auditing, learning the business, and developing that go-forward strategy. But it already is in the plans to create a ChatGPT guide for my team, and I want to do a training for anyone on the team who wants to know more about those AI writing tools. In a previous role that I was in, I did use ChatGPT for some translation, and the results were really great, because ChatGPT, unlike
the sort of translators that we've seen before, like the Google Translate and whatnot, you can tell it, hey, this is conversational. Here's who I am, what my status is, and here's who I'm talking to. So that's especially helpful. There are a lot of languages where your word choice actually changes based on your seniority, the seniority of the person you're talking to, the gender of the person that you're talking to, and yourself, and what their relationship is to you. So there's a lot of contextual word choice changes. And then also, I found that some traditional translators tend to make things really formal and can end up sounding really stilted. Whereas with ChatGPT, you can say, hey, this should sound conversational, use slang, it's a little more flexible. So I really like it for that, because translation is so hard and needs a really heavy hand. And I don't speak all of the languages. So knowing that I can do a pretty darn good job, and that I can just have someone on the other end who doesn't have to translate by hand, but rather can go through it and say, that shouldn't be that, or this should be over here. It really saves them a lot of time, which is a great thing. I've also used it, I'm not an email specialist. So sometimes for those cold emails and things, and I'm sitting there racking my brain, like, well, how do I not say, hi, my name is Lindsey McGee, and I'm this person from this company, and you should buy my stuff. It is very helpful in terms of saying, hey, I want to summarize this. I want to think about it this way. What are 3 things I could bullet point real quick? And then for me, I also have used it for things like meta descriptions and ads. So meta descriptions, it's great for, Google has said it's okay to use it for meta descriptions specifically. But it is, sometimes it's really difficult to take this 1,200 word piece that you just poured your heart and soul into and shrink it down into like 140 characters and know how it's going to impact someone when they look at that and whether or not they're going to click. So I found it really helpful for seeing how a system that is designed to read and process that information would summarize it. Kind of gives me a good idea of, well, do I like that summary, or do I want to tweak it, or what is it getting from this and returning back to me? Those are the ways that I've seen it. I think there's some really cool ways that you can add to your prompts to make it say what you want it to say. Again, it's really also about experimentation. Think about the areas of your business where you can handle having a draft that's not as perfect, or where you run into a lot of blockages, or where you don't have specialists and you need something to kind of jumpstart a little bit. Don't use it for the place where you already kick behind. When you are really awesome at something, let that be yours. Hold on to that. Have that be your space where you don't have to rely on AI and you can just be in your zone.
Yeah. That's great advice. And I think it's interesting. Your use case is kind of taking that longer form kind of piece and finding a way to condense it. Because I started in SEO and because I was very much an advertising writer doing digital for me and not so much like the content writing for I did websites and stuff, but it was mostly like banner ads and social media. Short form was my favorite challenge. I like writing short form copy and being as impactful as I can. For me, the struggle was long form. So in my case, a lot of times I like to use it as an outline, because I'll have an idea in my head for something that I know really needs to be thought out in more than just 200 words. And I'll just kind of stuck after a certain point. So I use it often to outline certain things like emails. And then what I find is I wouldn't have thought to make this point or bring up this instance. And I also find that when I'm using it, sometimes, we have a particular brand voice that we're going for, but when you write about the same things over and over and over again, sometimes actually prompting it for different metaphors or analogies or ways to say the same thing that you say over and over again in a new way has also been kind of interesting for me to see, because again, I'm putting in facts and things that I already know are to be true. I'm just asking it to kind of rephrase them or reframe them in a new way. So I think it's really interesting how you're taking that long form and making it to short form.
Absolutely. And I see there are comments about blogs. So I do want to say one thing about blogging, because I think it's really important. And, there are a lot of risks. We talked about them with the data things. We talked about, don't treat AI like iRobot. It's not that. Don't treat it like that. And those biases are really important. But also when it comes to that SEO piece, it is so important to be aware, because I see so many people talking about use it for your blog, use it for your blog, use it to optimize for SEO. And there are also people who say, well, Google says it's okay because Google says that AI generated content is fine. And that's where, again, you need to make sure you read what Google is saying. You need to make sure you read what the real source is saying, because Google says very specifically, AI generated content, great for uses in a lot of different ways. It's been used for years for things like sports, casting and things like that, to have the scores and the weather up. There's all kinds of ways that you're using it. Having it for something like your meta description, that's okay. However, there is a line in their actual guidance about AI generated content that says using AI generated content for the purpose of manipulating the search results is considered spam. It is a violation of the spam guidelines. So using it for blogs that are for some outlining, totally get that. That's very helpful for people who need to have a structure. Using it for, your paid side, not a problem at all. But using it for web pages that you are designing and writing that content specifically to rank, you could get in trouble down the line. And there's a lot of people who think, well, how are they going to be able to tell? But there are already systems being built that are going to detect it. Google's working on those systems. Even the people who made OpenAI, a lot of them are working on that because of issues in academia and plagiarism that are happening.
Academics, for sure, it's a struggle.
They're facing a lot of issues with this that we as marketers don't have to worry about as much. But they will be able to tell. There will be ways for them to tell. And also, quite frankly, when we think about SEO and we think about that helpful content, writing something that's been written 10 times before, that's not the best way to make yourself rank. Think about the patterns, think about the keywords, all of that's great. Come up with your outline, think about what's worked for other people. And then you have to infuse it with that unique point of view, with that innovation, with the real thought leadership that you have and your understanding of it and your brand and your voice. And ChatGPT is not going to be able to do that. So even if it could make a great SEO optimized piece, it's not going to last forever, in my opinion. Someone can go right ahead and prove me wrong, but in my opinion, that's not going to last forever because it's not going to be as intentional. And Google has said that that's not how they want people to be using this technology. And so that's why I always say take it with a grain of salt, because I've seen really reputable sources be talking about it for that. And it's really difficult when you haven't read the fine print. So I would be very careful with that. And with any use case that you have, we don't know, is Meta or is Instagram in 6 months going to say, hey, advertisers, no AI generated content, or we only want it used in this way. Right. So think about the publishers, the distribution channels that you're on and how they are treating AI, and read the guidelines that they are putting out, because that's going to give you the best information and to protect yourself and your business.
Because you don't want that content getting flagged. It's kind of
like
when we had the black hat issues in SEO and people were indexing on their keywords and things like that. You try to beat the system, and at some point the system catches up. So you always have to be of that. But yes, those are all very fair and great points, Lindsey. There was something else I was going to say and then I forgot what it was. So I'll just ask you the next question.
Sounds good.
Actually, it's my last question. So I do want to open it up to our live listeners as well, because I'm sure that you all have some questions. Don't be shy about dropping them into the chat. The last question I have for you today, Lindsey, is can you offer any tips or advice to content marketers who are hesitant or unsure about embracing it or even trying it? Because there's folks out there who haven't. Honestly, we had a room of like 50 or 60 people yesterday, and maybe half raised their hand when they asked if people were using it yet. How can they approach it with confidence and overcome any fears that they might have?
Yep, absolutely. And I also had that fear at the beginning. I was like, maybe if I just don't use it, then no one can catch me using it and say, oh, you should use it more. That's not going to work. You can't ignore it away. And I think that's become really clear to most of us. I know, I agree. Some days I agree. But number one, learn about large language models. Don't get pulled into the shininess. Don't get pulled into the brand names, because there's not just ChatGPT. There's ChatGPT, there's Whisper, there's Jasper, I think is another one. There's the things that Google's going to be doing, the Google Bard, things of that nature. There are so many different ones. They're all built on this system of large language models. And if there isn't one, if there's a brand name that you're unaware of, learn what the programming model is that it's actually built on. Learn what kind of machine learning it's using, and then learn about that system and learn about what the limitations are and how it works. So then when someone comes at you and says, well, I think that it thinks about this and it considers this, and you can say, that is not how that works. Here is how that works. And that's really going to help you understand what you're working with. It'll help you understand the opportunities of, this is an amazing natural language processing system. If I give it text, it is going to understand the context of that text. It's going to understand the statistical way that writing happens. And therefore, as a writing tool, incredible. So you can look at it and see this amazing thing. Like I said, with translation, it makes total sense why something built on this model would be so good at translation versus why it would be so bad at accuracy. So learning about the actual models themselves is super important, and being aware of when changes to those models happen. So if you are reading about ChatGPT, subscribe to OpenAI if they have a newsletter. Get the information directly from the people who are building these things, because that is really important.
Yep.
Write a guide. I personally, the best way I learn is by teaching others. Yep. Write a guide. Look at every one of those use cases that you see online and think about, what does this use case mean for me, for my company? Is it good? Is it bad? How should we be using it? Is it a way that anyone should be using it? And then when we are doing it, what are the best practices that we want to put in there? Be transparent with your execs if they're asking for something outside of that scope. Tell them, this is what I researched, and based on that, I chose not to include this in our scope because of X, Y, Z. Don't let people bully you into using it in a way that you're not comfortable with or ready with, or that you're not confident about. And if they really need you to, then say, I need time to research if this is the right thing for us before we just dive in. And then, and I've said this before, and I'm going to say it every single day, you have more to offer than an AI ever will. You can be scared of it because some companies are going to mismanage it. Some companies in some industries are going to make the mistake of thinking that an AI can replace a human. And that is not true. And we as content marketers need to say that to ourselves every single day. You and your team have this infinite value of unique points of views, ideas, innovation, the context of the conversations that you have, whether they're at work or over Slack or Zoom or whatever. You have to be confident that you know your audience and your people and your business better than any AI ever will. You have data, it never will. So hopefully don't give it your data. You have data, it never will. And that's really important and has a really concrete value. And like I said, make sure that some of your work in some of your writing stays 100% human. Pick something that you really excel at, that you absolutely love. Like for me, I love blogging. I love writing these really long pieces. So I'm not going to use it for that because I have those skills inherently, and I can build it and I can be really proud of it. And then I can say, this is 100% me. And I think having that little piece is really going to help all of us writers maintain that confidence in what we bring to the table.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's just so much nuance to the art of writing and understanding a brand, tone, and voice and human nature. I mean, that's a lot to try for any machine, much less a person. There's a reason why not everyone can write, right? But not everyone's a writer. Not everyone can take brand voice and a concept and client goals and people, consumers at the end, all into consideration and kind of mash it together for that bigger conceptual takeaway. And so I think that's where it's like, I've never, having been in digital, because I kind of came into advertising, I started in direct mail, which was great because I got to see like my open rates or my coupon redemption rates through, I was on Sprint, which was funny, but just being able to get feedback on my ideas was one thing that I kind of fell in love with, in the industry and doing digital marketing and advertising specifically versus traditional, was because I got to kind of see how my work performed. I got to partner with strategy and sort of taking not just my content and my ideas, but finding the right places of people to with that is like, it's always so brilliant. So, in my opinion, I think it's just another tool. And in my opinion, it's another tool in the toolbox. It doesn't replace anyone per se. It just really gives us more opportunity to actually take our ideas a little bit farther, maybe a little bit faster, because we're doing less of that longer, like grunt work or more repetitive work. Like I just think back to me in those GD bulk sheets. Oh my gosh. It was so freeing to get beyond that. So kind of knowing how, when, and where to leverage it, where to play with it, where to stay away from it. I think all of these pieces of advice and guidelines that you've given have been tremendous. I remember the other thing I was going to say earlier was that I spent the week before last, I volunteered to review some essays on ethics from some high school students through the Better Business Bureau for a scholarship. And I will tell you that, there were none that were GPT or AI generated. And I'll tell you, I can still read things and tell you who wrote them. Like as a person who has been writing for almost her entire life, I'm reading and I'm like, this is clearly a high school student's writing. Like the ChatGPT doesn't know how to write like a high school student. There's still going to
Yeah.
be problems and issues. And even when other people write to me, like
Hmm.
I pick up on tone of voice so quickly
Yep.
and so easily. If it's more than a couple sentences, I can tell you. I feel like I can tell you. Maybe we should test this sometime. I'll have somebody send me some
No,
emails and I can see which one's AI generated and which one was me.
I agree with you. My favorite was I asked it to create a voicemail for cold
Yep.
calling. And it was
Mhm.
like a full elevator pitch. And I just sat there, I was like, obviously, this robot has never received a very annoying
Elevator
voicemail.
pitch.
Because a voicemail elevator pitch, they're just going to hang up and never talk to you again. And a voicemail should
Yep.
be very simple. Hey,
Uh-huh.
this is me. I called you. Here's how you can get back to me. I really think we could do something great here. Move on. And I
Mhm.
just wanted to see what it would create. And it was so funny because I realized it doesn't have the context to understand. So it just knows, a voicemail could sound like this, and this is what you're promoting. And that's all
Yep.
it's going off of because it doesn't have that
Mm.
human understanding of people's reaction to realizing they have a voicemail.
They're like, oh my God, what
So,
is happening? That's so
right.
true. You did remind me too, for whatever reason, something you said there. Just I think talking about emails. This was actually around, gosh, I want to say 10 years ago. There was a plugin for Google that was developed and created by women to help them remove modifiers from their
Mm-hmm.
email. So I will tell you, I have taken something that I've written from an email standpoint to somebody that's a perspective, from a sales perspective, and I plop it in there and I said, make this sound more confident.
Yep.
And that way it kind of removes that more, although I feel like it's just still overly like, all the exclamation points. I'm like, please stop. I'm not like a huge exclamation point fan. I know I can just delete them, but I'm like, don't write like a
Yeah.
cheerleader. Like, tell me, make this sound confident. Like, how would a confident, sales dude write this? And it
Yep.
helps remove those modifiers and kind of reposition the order of some things. And it's not always perfect, but I can always take away at least one new learning from it. So I might not take
Yes.
that email and use that whole thing. I might just take one line, or I might just take something that it did a little different that I didn't think to do
Mm-hmm.
and be like, oh, that's cool. So that's another use case I have found in the sense of emails too, is just kind of
Oh,
helping
yeah.
bending my tone of voice to make it be more persuasive or be more confident, just in case we happen to
Yeah.
use those modifiers in our
Oh,
language, as
yes.
we tend to do as women, unfortunately.
Yeah. Women statistically use the word just more often. I just need a moment of your time. Could you just get
Yes,
this to me? And
I
it makes us
feel.
sound intrusive. And it
Uh-huh.
kind of leans into that very biased, old-fashioned sense of nagging. Could you
Yep.
just get this done? And so it doesn't work very well. And also your language, there's always a better adjective than there is an adverb. Cut out the word
Yes.
very from all of your communications. Very does nothing for anyone.
All
Um,
right. I
very
say
and
so
really
a
are
lot.
not, they're not that useful. So yes, there's a lot that you can do to make yourself move. I've never thought of that as a use case, but that makes a lot of sense. How can
Yeah.
I make this sound a
Mhm.
little more assertive or a
Yep.
little more robust or whatnot?
Uh-huh.
Adjectives. So
Yep.
that's awesome.
Exactly. It's like a whole new thesaurus, which, I love my thesaurus still too. I
Oh,
wanted to mention
agreed.
too, Andy had dropped into the chat. Thank you, Andy. And I agree. This is another great resource on the
Mhm.
topic is the AI Marketing Institute. They were actually present at the event that we went to earlier this week as a group. So it's a great site, great resource. They're actually hosting in Cleveland. I'm going to give them a plug. A MyCon. It's MAICON. So it's Marketing AI Institute conference in Cleveland. So yeah,
Nice.
be
That's
sure to check
awesome.
it out. I'm curious to kind of hear and see where things go. Here we were last year, not talking about any of this, and now there's entire conferences around it. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, friends, there's no avoiding it, but I do feel like, hopefully you've all felt more informed and equipped and inspired in some ways that you can start to kind of lean into it, to learn while also educating, et cetera, et cetera. Lindsey, thank you so much for your perspective. It's super valuable and I really appreciate it.
I loved being here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So we are right at time. If you want to reach out to Lindsey, you can follow her on LinkedIn. Let her know that you tuned into the podcast today. If you have any other questions, otherwise, that's all for today. Thank you all so much. The hour went so fast, as always.
Thank you. All
Take
right.
care. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.